Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted. And I am your host, as always, Objectively Dan. And joining me this week on another fantastic episode is Brent Lee from the Unapologetics Podcast. Hey, Brent, tell everybody hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Going pretty good. So, no video feed of Brent tonight, having a bit of technical difficulties, but we were able to get him on the line here. So you're just going to be staring at my beautiful face for the next hour or so if you're watching this on YouTube, but you can also find the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast. This is Truth Wanted. This is the show where we talk about what people believe and why, and it is a call-in show. So if you see that number down there at the bottom of the screen, go ahead and call in. We have open lines, but joining me tonight is Brent Lee. Brent, go ahead and introduce yourself a bit, man. What is your podcast about?
So, my name is Brent Lee. You know, I do a podcast with my girlfriend Nikki. We're kind of odd, like we're an interracial couple, and I was heavily indoctrinated as a child. Mm-hmm. You know, I was homeschooled. I wasn't allowed to talk to anybody that wasn't a Christian. You know, and so my whole life was bubbled in and everything. So I kind of had a hard time coming out of that. And mm-hmm. Nikki is a black woman who is she was a political science major. So she's extremely intelligent. And so a lot of the show, we talked a lot about politics. She's teaching me about politics, mm-hmm. and we frame it through going over these different stories and things like that. And, you know, she teaches me about that. And then she's super unfamiliar with the Bible, like, or anything religious at all. Like, she was kind of already just like, I don't believe any of this stuff, you know, and was super unfamiliar with it. So I teach her some about apologetics, and, you know, I read her Bible stories, and her reactions are just fucking priceless.
That's
you know,
funny.
It's a lot of fun. It's fun to hear us both learn in real time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's so interesting. You know, I was talking to somebody this week about, you know, I was talking about kind of my story to them a little bit, and I mentioned, yeah, I came out as an atheist to my community, and they're like, "What do you mean you came out? Like you were gay?" It was like, well, yeah, like, I guess if you don't grow up in a Christian community, like, you don't understand how, like, declaring yourself as an atheist is kind of a bigger deal, right? Like, that just wasn't a concept that wasn't, you know, really aware to them. So it is interesting, like, when you're introducing some of the, like, especially biblical concepts to people who really aren't super familiar with it. And you guys mentioned that you are an interracial couple, and you guys talk about that a lot on the show, right? Kind of, you know.
Oh, yeah, that too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually a central tenet. Like, we don't really cover a lot. We actively try to mm-hmm. not talk about Donald Trump. Like, we try to not, because it just gets redundant and you just get frustrated. And so we kind of try to veer away from that. And we do more stories like from the root, mm-hmm. and more stories like about white supremacy, you know, and about inequality and things like that. You know, and we really focus hard on those topics. And, you know, Nikki's super passionate, and she's just so fun to talk to. And we were laughing and having a good time the whole time, but we're still talking about very serious issues.
Sure.
Yeah. We try to bring a little levity.
Absolutely. You know, a few years ago, I was, I did Tinder for a minute, right? And I went on a couple dates with a girl who was black, and she was, if you don't know me, I'm 6'5", and this girl was 6 foot tall.
Holy
and so I never got more stares in my life than when I was with this girl going out in public. And like, I think most of it was just in awe of just, you know, our giganticness. But like, it was fun. It was very different. And like, it definitely different from the experiences of me growing up in the town that I lived at, you know, like that was definitely not seen as much. And so even in the place I was at there, which is San Antonio, which is, you know, a very, very mixed community, you know, like people get stares about that, and people have their own thoughts about that, which is kind of interesting, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, you know, and that's the thing is, like, you know, we were just actually not too long ago, we went to dinner with Nikki's mom. Mm. And we went to this, it's a nice place out on it's like out on the water. You know, it's beautiful. We're in Florida. We're a Florida-based show. Mm-hmm. So we go out on the water, and it's a beautiful little restaurant out there. And we went, and we were getting our seat and everything. And Nikki's mom was just like, do y'all always get stared at like this? Mm. You know, because we just look odd. Like, she's a bigger black woman, you know, and I'm this little skinny white dude. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and we're constantly loudly talking about probably political shit that we shouldn't be talking about loudly in public. But
Sure.
you know, it doesn't help. But it was just funny to hear her reaction to, you know, seeing us together. Because usually we always were in private when we were with her mom, so it was funny to kind of see her experience what we experience regularly.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Like, not only is this a regular thing, but you're talking about the regular stuff you guys talk about, which is probably not, you know, great for Thanksgiving dinner conversations, right? So, yeah, it's very funny.
Yeah, it's almost like Phil Ferguson. We talk about everything you're not supposed to.
Oh, yeah,
you know what I mean?
for sure. Yeah. You guys, if you haven't seen my episode with Phil Ferguson on this show, you should definitely check it out. That was very funny. A lot of stuff went down
He's
there.
awesome. I love him.
Oh, he's great. He's super great. But, yeah, guys, this is a call-in show, so we have a bunch of open lines. Come on in. I saw somebody call in before the show and then left who was a flat earther. I love to talk about flat earth. Look, here's the thing. We were talking about this before the show. Cryptozoology, all right? Where's the crypto community at? Come here, y'all. Let's talk about cryptos. Right. I want to talk about Bigfoot. I want to talk about Loch Ness. I want to talk, like, all the stuff. Some people say I'm Bigfoot, and, like, that's part of my culture. I do get that a lot. But, you know, where's the real stuff, man? That's what I want to hit at. But anyway, you're joining us live here with Brent Lee from the Unapologetics podcast, and we're just talking about life, talking about experiences. What else do you guys like to talk about in your podcast? Like, what's some of the most recent things you were talking about?
So recently we had an episode called the Andy Kaufman of Gods. Is our latest episode.
Okay, tell me about that.
I mean, and well, I don't know if you know. Do you know much about Andy Kaufman?
I'm pretty familiar with Andy Kaufman, but maybe for those who aren't as familiar with, you know, his work and stuff.
Okay, so he was like the world's first troll.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, actually. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, right, like he was able to be a troll. Like he would have been great in those you know, videos where they like mess with people, but the cameras are all around, and then like, everybody comes out, it's just a prank kind of thing. Except that we didn't have any of that.
Sure.
Right. So he was just fucking with the crowd the whole time. Mm-hmm. You know, and they really got upset a lot of times. And he would do specials on TV where he made the TV seem like it was messing up, and you know, and he was laughing at the crowd. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was sort of this opposite, sort of weird kind of comedy that he introduced. And I just feel like it almost seems like that's the way God is. I don't know, like the Christian God. Anyway, is, you know, because we went, and it was actually, I read her the story of Balaam in the Bible, you know, about the talking donkey. Because I was just like, I got to read you this story. I'm sorry. Like, you know, if you're not familiar with the Bible, it's funny to hear this particular story. And it was like, and it was, you know, and it was like God was talking through the donkey, but as the donkey. That was the difference. That was the difference. It wasn't like God was like, hey, I'm God, and I'm just speaking to you through this. No, he was like making it like it was the donkey talking, almost like he was trolling the dude. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah, like
trying to upset him. And
you can definitely see a lot of that in the Bible. And I honestly, like, a lot of that stuff I think is very on purpose for what the genre was trying to teach. As far as like God can kind of do anything, and he can show up in all kinds of ways that will make you kind of doubt things, but you still need to kind of trust in the doubt. I think there's a lot of those kinds of themes showing up. And in that particular story, which you're talking about, which is the story of a prophet who is talking to this donkey, right? And this donkey is kind of complaining about, like, why do you treat me so badly and stuff. Like, there's kind of another metaphor there of it's been a while since I heard the story, but like, you know, like there's definitely like what seems absurd to us would have still seemed absurd to the audience that is reading this at the time. And I think that's kind of the point there, which is an interesting way to look at the literature. But if you're a literalist who thinks like this is something that actually happened in the history of the world, then that's a whole other kind of conversation, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I was when I was a Christian, I was total literalist. Everything, all this shit was real, you know. And when I was being raised too, it was funny because it was right in the middle of the satanic panic. So my mom was constantly filling my head with the fact that if I talked to other people, demons could get in me. And that's a terrible thing to do to a child.
Oh, yeah. Like, so I was, my growing up story is just kind of interesting just because of the beliefs I did and didn't have. The demons thing was always kind of bullshit to me a little bit, just because, like, I guess I'd seen so many movies and stuff. It never seemed real. And I guess it helped that I didn't grow up, Pentecostal or anything like that. So I never experienced, people claiming to have speaking in tongues and stuff like that, kind of the more spiritual aspects of Christianity, like literal spirits, I guess, invading people's bodies and stuff. So I don't know. Yeah, that's interesting how even we can both call ourselves Christians, and I mean, this is obvious for anybody who grew up this way, you can still find differences in your experiences and what you believed, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of distinctions there between the different doctrines, and that's almost my sticking point, honestly, when I'm talking to Christians and stuff. The main question that I like to ask people now that I'm an atheist is, if all these different doctrines exist, right? And I've met people from plenty of different doctrines, and they're all wholeheartedly trying to seek the truth of Jesus and everything, right? They're all the way in. They're in it, and they're receiving these messages from the Holy Spirit that are all different.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why can't he communicate one message to all of his people?
Oh, you know why, Brent?
You know what I mean?
You know why, Brent? There's a very simple reason why. There's false prophets, Brent. They don't have the true message. Your denomination is the one that has the true message, right?
That's right. That's what I get most of the time.
Yeah,
if they're doing it wrong.
For sure. I mean, if in the Baptist kind of culture that I grew up around, there was a lot of that kind of talk of, oh, these other denominations do not have it right. Like, don't be a lukewarm Christian, like in Revelation where God spits out kind of the lukewarm people that, that enter the kingdom of heaven. That's what we'd call them, right? The lukewarm Christians who just did not adhere to the real standards. You had to believe the exact same thing about gay marriage, about baptism, about all the points, right, or else you weren't doing Christianity right, bro. Like, that was the kind of Christianity I was taught was there is a list of requirements that you do have to have, or else you're not the real deal,
Right. And it's funny because, and this is the other thing is, and when it comes to like when you're getting saved, right, you go to this church, you're there, they play the music, they make it all so emotional. The music all sounds emotional. They got the strings going, they got the keyboard, the guitar, and it's the dude up there is very charismatic, and then he says, all right, now if you believe that the Lord Jesus is calling you, stand up in front of everyone and declare that you are now a Christian by standing up. And okay, I see you there, sir. I see you. Okay, you can say, okay, sir, I see you right there. I see you. Can say, and this person is stood up, and they have no fucking idea that there's a talking donkey in the book that they're supposed to believe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
So now then they go backwards, and now they go back to the people that they trust now and ask, hey, when people ask me about this, I don't understand what I should say to defend what I believe. So, okay, here's this book on apologetics.
Right.
And here's the reasons why you believe. That's not the way belief works.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's like this instant.
You're retroactively defending something that you've already come accustomed to believing, right? And like that was definitely my problem. It was like, wow, I didn't even realize how ignorant I was of my own religion, as far as like, wow, I hadn't not read the whole Bible. I don't think I read all 4 Gospels until I was in college, and it was just like, and I'm supposed to be like, this is supposed to be the biggest and most important thing of my identity, is that I am a Christian and that I am a servant of God. And just like the more I tried to understand it, the more explanations I got from things, and the more these explanations kind of conflicted, and then the whole structure just kind of falls apart. But you don't get to that place until you care enough to really look into it, right? And there are some people who care enough, and then they become apologists. And then there's the rest of us that have shows at the Atheist Community of Austin, I guess, and do what we do now. But
that's right.
Like, for me, like, I don't blame people for not knowing, because they don't tell you that. They don't tell you that way. Like,
No.
I never went to a single Sunday school lesson, and believe me, I've been to a lot of fucking Sunday schools where I heard about the story of the talking donkey. That was not a thing that came up. Now, I'm sure it's there in some places.
But one they tell you.
Yeah, it's just not, kind of put that one behind because, hey, it's Old Testament, right? It's kind of crazy, but, yeah.
Magical shit happened back then, It was like
happened.
Lord of the Rings time. Like,
Hell yeah. Curses and shit. Oh, yeah. It was
it's all real, though.
Yeah, there was the idea of like the cessation of miracles and stuff after the life of Christ. Like that's also like a theological thing that people say. Like basically a lot of this after Christ, like a lot of that stuff that happens in the Bible just kind of doesn't happen anymore, which is just like, okay,
right.
Isn't that
like
convenient, like.
Yeah, I mean, almost just like a perfect omnipotent God making a mistake and then having to correct it,
Yeah, it's just more like, we can't prove this stuff to you. You got to have faith that this stuff happens. You weren't there.
Yeah,
right.
And it was funny too because like I used to be. I mean, I was so in it. Like I was so hardcore. Like for instance, I used to listen. There was this radio station called 93.3 FLZ. And it was basically the pop. It was like the pop thing, but they did like a morning show, and I listened to the morning show and stuff. And I remember the one time they were talking about this woman who had like taken a key or something and like heated up the key and burned kids with it to get demons out.
Oh my God!
And it was awful. Yeah. And one of the hosts of that show said, "Oh, well, that's what religion does to you." And I was like, "Oh, hell no. I'm calling those motherfuckers."
Oh.
And then I ended up, and I yelled. I mean, I was just all up in arms about, this shit, just so upset. And then I was the fucking commercial for the show after that for a while.
Really? Oh, wow.
They're arguing with me on,
Of course.
Yeah.
Oh man. There's this Catholic radio station that I used to listen to on my drive here to the studio. And like they had call-ins and stuff in there, and I was so tempted sometimes just to be like, hey, they talked about, they talked about the things Catholics talk about. They talked about abortion, and they talked about, like all the kind of pet issues there and stuff. And some of the stuff was kind of, a lot of the stuff was pretty benign, to them sharing stories about good things that happened in their community and stuff. But sometimes it was like, hey, you're wrong because of this, or you need to fix your life because of this. It's like, man, I wish you wouldn't tell people that because that's not super great. But anyway, if you want to argue with us on this call-in show, and maybe we can make a commercial of you, please call in. Some lines are still open. I do want to go ahead and get to the calls tonight. Are you ready to talk to some people, Brent?
Oh, I'm down. I'm ready to argue. Let's do it.
This is not that kind of show. Like, if you, listen, I'll say this. If you want to start a fight with us, go ahead, but we won't pick fights with you. Like, we definitely just want to talk and see, again, what people believe and why. That's what it's all about. So first, I want to go ahead and go to Reed in Temple, Texas. Hey, Reed, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Holy cow. I didn't expect it to go boop, boop, right in my head.
Heck yeah, dude. Yeah, I'm getting a little bit of background noise there. If you could just clear it up a bit, and we'd be happy to talk to you.
I am actually driving in a Ford Transit, so there's absolutely nothing I can do about it.
Okay, Reed, well, tell you what. Go ahead and give us your spiel, and I might mute you in between us talking just to deafen the noise a little bit. But, yeah, tell us what you wanted to talk to us about.
Oh, yeah, I'm totally okay with that. Okay. So I've been watching Paul Keevan, the Atheist Experience, for most of a year and a half now, and that branched me out to other shows, and I started watching yours, and I know it kind of follows this like street epistemology-esque kind of feel to it, where you can talk about everything and talk it through.
Sure.
But I've tried to learn that for myself. To be able to critically think about everything. And that's getting really hard. Like, I didn't start to think for myself until my senior year, or even when I was 22 years old. I spent most of my childhood just not thinking because it got me in danger. Like, I had ADHD. I didn't know what was going on. Mm-hmm. Long story short, I'm trying to build critical thinking skills, and I wanted to talk to you about street epistemology and how to do it better.
Okay.
Be better at street epistemology.
So, like, how to be better at street epistemology in general. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Right.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
real quick, like, dude, I can totally identify with what you said, like trying to not think about things. Like I did that so often, it's not even funny. Like I would try to not look up information because I was afraid that I would be wrong. And it would challenge my whole worldview.
I completely agree.
For sure. All right, well, Reed, I'm going to put
It
you...
really sucks.
Yeah.
I had a really shitty childhood. Like, I grew up middle class, but it was really shitty. Because the way I was treated, my brothers and I were treated by my dad. And I've since grown away from those things, but I know it reflects on me now. And it was easier back then to just shut off.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's really hard to get a grasp of how to think through things logically. And I didn't build those skills growing up. So I'm trying to figure out how to do it better.
All right, so Reed, I want to give my response to you. I am going to put you on mute for just a bit, but I will get you back on whenever, we give you a chance to have a back and forth here, just so we're minimizing the noise. But yeah, like, what's the basics? What's the 101 to do good street epistemology? Well, first, you should know I'm definitely not an expert in the subject. I've been, doing this for a few years now. I've been studying street epistemology and stuff and what it does for people. But, there are a couple basic ideas that I think you should have first before you study street epistemology or really want to do it. And one is, if you're out to convince people's minds and to tell them you're wrong, you need to stop. And that's kind of a weird thing for people, because when people want to go out, they want to go out and convince people of their own ideas and tell people what's true and what's not true. But really, as a street epistemologist, that's not my job. So I get calls every single week. People who believe the earth is flat, people who believe that Jesus Christ is Lord. I mean, just all kinds of stuff. And I walk away with those conversations most of the time. I don't change people's minds too much. I'll get them places. Maybe I'll make them think about, stuff that they hadn't thought about before, but they're not completely demolishing their worldview. And I think that's a problem that a lot of people have. When we want to have conversations with people, we really want to convince people so hard. But Brent and I were just talking at the beginning of the show, it took us a long time to get to where we were at. It's a lot of thinking. And It took me way too long, in my opinion, for myself. But, when I had my conversation first with Anthony Magnabosco, as many people know, I did not become an atheist the next day. I did not become an atheist the next week. I didn't become an atheist 6 months later. It took me a while to go on that journey, but that was an important step in that journey because it made me think about things a little bit. So the first thing is just an attitude shift that I think that's a personal thing that everybody has to work on. It's something I have to work on when I have conversations with people. There's a lot of people that tell me oh, Dan, you're really patient with people. I'd be freaking out. It's no, man, it's just in my mind, I definitely want to say other things, right? I want to tell them that they're wrong, but that's not my place when we're having these conversations. My point is to just show people maybe other paths of thinking, because I have to make the assumption with every single person I talk to that they could be right. And I need to figure out, well, how do I know that they could be right? What questions would I ask myself if my own opinion, if I were to have this belief, what would I need for myself to justify that this belief is true? So that's always the first general bit of advice before I tell anybody any cool techniques or any particular questions. It's just an attitude thing. Brett, what do you think about street epistemology and stuff? What's your beginner tips or anything like that?
Yeah, honestly, giving away your position is the last thing you want to do, because that right there, it poses an opposition. And then when you pose an opposition like that, people tend to revert back to their automatics. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's where they start to just fire off. They'll just stop thinking and they'll do what I used to do and just start reciting lines basically of why they believe, but it's not actually why they believe. The whole purpose of street epistemology is to get people to think about why they believe what they believe. And so if you give your position away as saying, no, but what about the census? That doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah.
And it's, why would you go somewhere and then everybody counts you and then you go somewhere else? That doesn't make any sense. You don't want to do that, because that's, while that's a very good point, it doesn't, because all it's going to do is make them double down.
Yes.
And you want the person to evaluate why they're thinking things, and that to keep that in mind more than anything. You don't want to change their mind right now, like you said, Dan. It's more about just putting out that idea or challenging their what they believe in a way that they will evaluate and actually self-reflect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the most important part. And even if we don't change any minds, if we can just get them to think about why they think things, they might loosen their grip on some of the harmful aspects of what they believe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like maybe it isn't. Maybe the LGBTQ community is not that terrible, or whatever. You know, stuff like that. You know, we can just get them to loosen at least on those things.
Yeah. Like I do street epistemology. My MO is not to make everybody atheist. That's like the last thing on my mind. The reason why I do it is because I do believe that beliefs can cause harm. I know because I had beliefs that caused myself harm. I've seen people with beliefs that cause harm to others. And I think all of our beliefs should be worth examining. I don't think people have the tools necessarily to examine them. I think whether it's a lack of a critical thinking courses in the public education system, or maybe it's just they're encountering an idea that they just haven't thought of before because they were afraid to have these conversations with people. That's another thing too, because like a lot of these conversations outside of the sphere of a show like this can be uncomfortable, and like people are used to getting into fights when it comes to religion and politics, right? Like that's and people get real scared.
And religion.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm sorry, but religion is almost meant to simplify. Right? Like it's meant to take everything in your mind that's complicated and difficult to absorb and make it basic and make it black and white. This is right. That is wrong. You know what I mean? It's meant to just basically paint everything in this basic form.
Absolutely.
Because that's comfortable, and it is comfortable for us, and it's easy. It's like we were just saying about not thinking about things. It basically makes it so it's easy to do that.
Well, you're taught that there's certain immutable truths, and like your worldview is going to be warped based on those truths, and you're going to justify everything you can to keep those truths afloat in your mind, and that's why you have all ranges of. I mean, if we're talking about Christianity runs the whole spectrum of between acceptance of LGBT people and like all kinds of different ideas and theologies, because people are willing to give up some ideas but keep other ones, because there's always going to be some that are just central to the tenets. You'd be hard pressed to find a Christian that doesn't say like Jesus is Lord. I'm sure there are Christians out there who say that, but like that's a pretty central thing. Everything else might be a give or take, but there's going to be those couple ones that don't stick around. But anyway, hopefully that's some at least some basic advice on street epistemology. Reed, I'm going to put you back on the microphone here so you give a chance to kind of respond to what we're saying here. Can you hear us again, Reed?
Yeah.
Great.
I got on smoother highway, so hopefully the noise is down.
Sweet.
I didn't have a disagreement with anything y'all said. Like I had already thought about trying my best to remove myself. And I'm sure Facebook debates have not helped me in my mindset.
Yeah.
So non-confrontational conversations is to me, I think, is the best way to go. No name calling, no attacking. As soon as you do that, you completely change the tone of the idea exchange, and it gets hostile. Unfortunately, to tell you the truth, I am trying to be better at street epistemology, but it's kind of like I'm passionate about it and teaching people and getting people to think, because I want to be able to think and find the truth and find the right answer. And my girlfriend is extremely Baptist. I am a Caucasian, nerdy, white kid, that was redundant, that is dating a very Louisiana black, extremely intelligent, beautiful woman, extremely opinionated. And she already knows I'm an atheist. I've been to church with her a bunch of times. She is 100% confident that that the rapture is coming. But she's not the kind of person to shove it down anybody's throat. She has gay friends that she loves dearly. She's very open. I guess she's as accepting as we are to the LGBTQ+ community. But she'll end it with, "But they're going to hell." Like that kind of.
I see. So, Reed, do you think her
And I want
beliefs.
him to be able to critically think about that.
Yeah, are her beliefs? Are they an impediment to your relationship enough to where you think you might have to change her mind about something?
See, that's what I fear. Like,
Oh no, Reed, we're losing you a little bit here.
No.
You're going under a bridge?
Going under a bridge or something. He's out there in Temple, Texas, so anything could be happening. If you've ever been out there.
No, dude. I'm driving from Brenham out to Elton, and then.
Reed, you're breaking up, dude. I'm so sorry, man. Okay, I'm gonna put you back on hold again, Reed, until we can hear from you again. But so let's talk about this just a little bit, and then move on to some other calls here. But yeah, when is it like what is the limit with the personal people in your life, especially your interpersonal relationships, your loved ones, the ones closest to you? Like when is it time to have a conversation? And when is it time to talk about your own beliefs about something versus theirs? It's something that I haven't yet quite solved myself. There's certainly guidelines as far as like, well, is your relationship with that person going to harm relationships with other people? For example, if you're with someone who has harmful ideas about the LGBT community, and one of your best friends is gay, well, that's going to be a big deal, isn't it? You can't really go out to dinner with them, can you? I mean, maybe you can, and maybe they have it, hide that in the back of their mind, but there's always going to be that tension there. What do you think about this, Brent?
Yeah, it's like with my mom. Like I love my mom, and she is the sweetest woman on the planet. But her naivety, because it becomes a problem because she has these ideas of believing that even just the fact that you believe somebody is choosing to be LGBTQ in some form, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this was a big problem for me because I was pansexual. I'm pansexual. So, and I didn't know that when I was a Christian.
Sure.
So it actually reinforced this whole concept of, you can choose it because I'm pansexual. I can. I actually am seeing, I'm attracted to men. I'm attracted to women. I'm attracted to trans men. I'm attracted to trans women. I'm attracted to I have these feelings about people, and and to me at the time, it was like, dude, I totally already know you can choose this because I feel these attractions.
Sure.
And you're wrong. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, for saying that it's innate, but, and so those type, but, just believing something like that, where you're acting like you know something about another person's experience without actually listening to them telling you about their experience, and you already came to a conclusion about what, they're just wrong, or they're just, what is it, they to their reprobate minds or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's a problem because that becomes harmful in how they vote.
Yep.
For one thing.
Yep.
Because that's very harmful to a lot of people, how you vote. And the other thing is, it's just how and just how you treat people. You end up patronizing people and being really. And you can change other people's minds too. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing is my mom could have been talking to other people and be like, "Oh yeah, you're right. It is a choice. You're right. I shouldn't think that these people are just like this, and I should treat them like, good, normal humans because they're just choosing to be horrible."
Yeah.
No, that's not what it is.
Yeah. So Reed, I'm gonna we'll get you back on in a second so we can say our adieus here. But like my take on this personally is, if they love you enough, or if they like you enough, or they are willing to put up with you for your beliefs, right? Use that to your advantage to have conversations with people, but don't expect change to happen all at once. I've been on both sides of this, by the way. I've been with people who I've definitely believe differently from me for my beliefs now, and I've also been with people where I was when I was a bit more conservative, and they were a bit more liberal on some things, and we had these kinds of conversations and stuff. And I wish I could go back to some of those people who are a bit more liberal about things and say, "Hey, look look at me now. Like, I'm kind of on your side about some of this. But you know, like, if I think that's a good thing, actually, if you're with someone who doesn't necessarily believe the same things you do, because what better person to have a conversation with about these kinds of things than someone that you really care about? You know, because that's going to ensure that this is happening. This is a long-term thing, that this isn't just a one and done thing. Like, that's the advantage of you know, like, we're using LGBT examples a lot, but like, there's a lot of politicians, I mean, at least more than one, who has changed their minds about LGBT people because someone in their family came out as LGBT. And that personal matters really do change the heart a little bit when it happens to you personally.
Dick Cheney.
Yeah, Dick Cheney was the one I was thinking of. Yeah, that's
like the worst person ever. Yeah. He's just awful. But yeah, he loosened his views
for sure
on LGBTQ because of his daughter, right? His daughter?
For sure. Well, Reed, you're back on. I'm putting you back so I can hear you again. Any last closing thoughts bore we head to the next
hurricane?
Yeah. Any closing thoughts, Reed, before we go to the next call?
I really appreciate what you guys have opened up and said. Unfortunately, there isn't too much of this on the internet to really explain through. I guess is it philosophy? To explain these kinds of
truth wanted, man.
We have in our critical thinking. Yeah.
It's its own thing, right?
It is. I love it, and I'm going to share this. This is awesome. I'm on TV, Mom.
Well, great, Reed.
I really appreciate what you guys have said. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I'm going to get a better grasp on this. I've been looking at the short goal instead of looking at the long goal of eventually feeling like I'm on the same thinking ground as someone that doesn't have the same beliefs as me.
For sure.
In my personal life.
Well, I'm glad you could learn something from this, Reed, and thanks again for calling. I hope to hear from you again. Maybe next time when you're not driving, so we can get a better quality connection here. But good luck with your relationships, good luck with life, and have a safe drive, brother. Sweet. Good conversations all around. That's a topic that comes up a lot, especially that last point of, you know, when is it appropriate to talk about this thing? Like, the example we've used in the past is, you know, like, like grandma's at grandma's funeral, right? Do you talk about whether or not they're in heaven or not? You know, like, that's the kind of stuff we've talked about before on here. And it's like, you know, like, it's a bit of a gray area. You know, like, you want to be true to your values and true to your understanding, but there's also this idea of being polite and of being tolerant of other people's views, and we have to navigate those relationships with people, and ultimately that's going to be up to you. You know, how much you're willing to tolerate versus how much you're willing to put up with it, and maybe change people's minds. Who knows? But
yeah, it was like my at the church I used to go to. They would always say, "Hey, everybody's a Christian at a funeral."
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well,
you know, that was like their favorite line.
Yeah, it's a bit of a projection there, maybe, but yeah, for sure. Well, we do have some other callers here on the line, and let's definitely get to them. I want to go to Chris in Washington State. Hey, Chris, can you hear us? What's up?
Yeah, I can hear you. Is the fact that my phone's on speaker, is that messing with your audio?
You know what? You sound great right now. So wherever you're at, just stay where you are, and you should be good. Don't go driving on the highway now,
good.
Okay?
I'm not. I'm sitting in my bedroom. I can't. Yeah. No,
Sure.
I'm good.
What did you want to talk to us about, Chris?
Perfect.
So I guess I had more of a question, not a claim or anything like that.
Okay.
My question was, what is your guys' views on the more esoteric interpretations of different sacred texts, and, you know, particularly the Bible, and do you think they hold any, you know, place as far as useful interpretations in that regard?
Wow, what a great question to ask Brent, since this is kind of his thing right now with his show. I want to let Brent answer this question first.
Well, I have to back up because, you know, again, I was homeschooled, and I don't know what the word esoteric means.
Oh.
So we're going to have to...
So, esoteric would be like obscure, you know, and there's definitely some, obscure interpretations of the Bible, especially if we're talking about early interpretations of Christianity with, like, you know, sort of the mystery cult ideas that they had. If we're talking about Jesus was actually, was completely in spirit and didn't actually have a body. That's definitely one. There's the one where Jesus is actually from the dimension of Barbelo, I think is what it is. That's in like the book of Judas. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff out there,
So I guess specifically what I was referring to. So there's the exoteric interpretations, meaning what everybody, the majority of the public reading it, and even throughout history thinks is what it's trying to say or what it's trying to convey. The esoteric, meaning the less known, like he said. So anyway, the esoteric interpretation that I'm more thinking of is how the story actually directly relates to the motion of the stars and the motion of the planets through the different houses and the constellations. And, like just, for example, the crucifixion, the sun dies on the cross. Well, the sun actually sets through the Crux constellation on December 21st. It stays in that point in the sky for 3 days and then starts rising again, is resurrected after 3 days through the house of Virgo, born of a virgin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
things along those lines.
So the astrologers' interpretations of Christianity. I definitely have some thoughts about this. Brent, do you have any you want to throw out right away, or?
I think, based on what you're saying, it seems like, it's a lot of connections to things. And I think, honestly, if, like what you're talking about is like a phenomenon that happened at that time. Is that like where we're getting at? Like a star, like something that a star did at that time?
Well, so I think it's relating to this idea that certain biblical texts are actually in direct relation to certain astrological signs. And one of them is an example of the cross being something that happens at a specific time of the year and stuff. I've heard some other stuff with some other stories kind of being lined up with certain star signs happening at the same time. I think that's what Chris is getting at.
Right. Okay. I think I got this. So a lot of this, I think, and this is just completely my opinion, and I totally could be mistaken on all of this, and I just want to frame it that way. What we do a lot of times, it's with like for instance, with the census. The census was something. It was the census of, I think it was Quirinius or Quirinius, yeah. And it happened at the time, but it happened like in sort of a similar time, right? But they were writing the origin story of Jesus. And so they were like, oh, yeah, there was a census. So that would be a good reason for him to be able to go back to Judea, as I think that's what they were doing. And they, it was sort of like this, it seemed like this looking back as this thing happened, and let's make it apply to the story, right? So, at the time, it was like the census happened, and the census didn't happen until 10 years after King Herod had already died. But they applied it to the Jesus story, right? And it was put in there as a reason for Joseph to have to go back to a specific place.
Sure.
And you know what I mean? But it was something that they thought.
It's a narrative device.
Like, that was around.
Yeah.
It was exactly. Thank you. Yes, it was a narrative device. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's like my point. I think that was the same thing with the stars. Like, this weird thing happened with the stars. Let's figure out how this can apply to the story that we're trying to tell here.
Sure. So here's my take on this. Out of all the biblical scholarship I've ever read, the one thing that's for certain is there was never a single Christianity that kind of branched off into all the Christianities. It seems the farther back you go in Christianity, the splits have always been there. Even in the Bible itself, if you look at the early church, we're talking about splits between Peter and Paul on theology and stuff. Christianity has always been a melting pot of different ideas, and I have no doubt that the early Christians probably put some astrology stuff in a lot of their teachings and writings. You can find evidence of early archaeology of Christianity, of Christians who had talismans, who had magic objects that they thought would protect them for stuff. And it's really crazy to think about because that's such a different idea of what we imagine Christianity today. But Christianity has kind of always been a melting pot of different ideas. Remember, Christianity started as a Jewish thing in like was already taking different stuff, you know, and you could definitely find parallels with Christianity with other stuff. I don't know if
dude, how oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well,
but how fascinating would it have been to live in a world where there was so much mystery, there was so much unknown.
Yeah.
You know, that they didn't know these things. So there was so much that you could just go to in your mind because there's just all this unknown.
Yeah.
You know, now it's like we don't have the benefits of being able to think like that.
For sure. Absolutely.
You know?
And you know, my take on this, Chris, is that there may not be one legitimate way to interpret Christianity, because when we think about interpretations of Christianity, all we really mean is we're studying what the different beliefs of different people at different times. And really, we can only go back so far. We can only know so much. I think the astrology stuff, you know, is esoteric for a reason in that I do think it's kind of in a smaller category of belief. Did any of the original authors of any of the books of the New Testament, were they practicing signs and astrology? I mean, maybe like in the book of Revelations, but the scholarship I read hasn't really tied a whole lot of those ideas into what at least the writers of the Gospels or the writers of, you know, of these books have put into. I think there's a lot of people who peddle that stuff for sure and say, I've met Hindus who've tried to convince me that Jesus was a spiritual master, you know, and that he was one of these people. Yeah, seriously, it doesn't make sense if you think, well, like, Jesus ate fish and stuff, and Hindus, you're not supposed to. Anyway, it's a whole thing, right? But and there's definitely people who try to, you know, encompass the religions into all kind of one mass and make kind of a grand theory of everything when it comes to religious texts and stuff, which I think a lot of that is kind of bull. But certainly, were there Christians who practiced astrology and who understood the star signs with that of Jesus and his life and the stories of the Bible? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's definitely been a thing and will probably continue to be a thing. I'm sure it's, you know, lots of people out there still do that. It's just not as many, right? What do you think, Chris?
What's that? I mean, I heard what you said, but what did you say just a second ago?
Well, I
said my name.
Well, I was just saying, I think people throughout, you know, in the past, people have believed that the astrology ties with Christianity, and I think people will continue to believe that. But I think it's always going to be a fringe concept that, you know, may or may not have some legitimacy. But the history is so old at this point, and we can only know so much about the past that we really won't know how big of a movement that was. We can already, I can certainly say that from the scholarship I've read, it certainly wasn't quite the majority. And I don't think the original authors really intended to have too much of those kinds of motifs in their writings.
Right. Well, okay. So I guess that's fair for the take on the Bible. Mm-hmm. But as far as more esoteric interpretations of things in a broader sense, I mean, even you can find these different interpretations in alchemy and Hermeticism and Gnosticism, and I guess that's more of what my question was about. Is have you read any Manly Hall or like Carl Jung or?
I've definitely read some Jung, you know, that Jungian psychology and stuff. I am familiar with it.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I guess.
No, definitely not. I will now that you've brought them up.
Right. Yeah. What about that, Chris?
Still learning.
Well, I mean, Manly Hall, for example. I mean, he's one of the people that brought up a lot of these, you know, different interpretations, whether it was just his view or whether he's referencing different people, citing them in his the book that he wrote. It's called The Secret Teachings of All Ages. I don't know. He had a lot of very, very interesting takes on Masonry, Freemasonry, you know, just a range of different topics that, and when I read the book, I mean, a lot of them kind of really blew my mind, but you do see these overarching themes that are kind of consistent throughout these different practices, whether it be organized religion or alchemy or, you know,
I think you can always find themes in that kind of stuff, but like, especially if we're talking about Jungian archetypes and stuff like that, you can find Jungian archetypes in Dr. Seuss books. You know, like I could say that
Right.
Horton Hears a Who is about the plight of the Jewish people. You know,
that was his point.
Yeah.
That was his point, though, is that they're always present.
Of course.
In people's thought process. You know.
Of course, like because we're all humans and we all like to make stories and we write them in similar ways. But like, I think people take that too far and really try to find some really deep stuff in here when really it's just like, no, we're humans and we all kind of write in similar ways. You know, like I think that's what it boils down to. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's almost like, have you ever heard of urban legends? You know,
All the time.
Like,
yeah.
Right. Yeah. So urban legends are only fun, right? They're only fun if you think they're real, right?
They're only fun if you don't go to Snopes.com, you know, and figure that stuff out. Yeah. That's what it really boils down to.
But the whole concept is like, okay, this scary thing, you know, you're telling this story, you know, and it has this narrative, right? I don't know which one we could talk. We could talk about the woman at the gas station where the dude has the hatchet in the back seat.
yeah. Okay, that's classic.
Right. The moral of the story is always check your back seat when you get in the car.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the thing that makes it's a story and it has a narrative, right? But the thing that makes the story get to you, that makes it connect to the person that you're talking to, is the fact that that you're saying that it's true.
Yeah.
Not demonstrating that it's true. That's not what I meant. But you're saying that it's true.
Yeah, I get what you're saying there, I think.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it adds this level of connectivity to it because now you're like, oh, this is something that could actually happen.
Exactly.
And that's what kind of, and it's akin to the King Arthur stories and things like that, you know, where it's like, no, this really happened and this was a real dude, you know, and he fought dragons and ogres and giants and all this stuff. And it's like, it's what the minstrels did, you know, they took these narratives and then they amplified them, you know, whatever. But the whole thing, the reason why people liked them was because they believed that they were real. You know,
I think
I don't know.
I don't know. I think I think definitely there were people who thought it was real. I'm not sure if every single person who wrote. I mean, obviously the people who wrote these stories about King Arthur and stuff didn't think they were real, right? Or maybe they're adapting it from other sources and stuff. But like, I do think that is part of the fun in imagining that they're real, or creating a mythos and not knowing whether or not something is real. You know, it gets passed down from generation to generation so long that it becomes ingrained in the culture. So at that point, it doesn't really matter if it's real or not because it affects the way that you live your life to some degree. I mean, it is fascinating to look at these kind of cross-cultural stories. Well, Chris, I do want to get to our next caller here, but thanks for bringing up, you know, these kind of fascinating topics of, you know, esoteric interpretations and like Jungian archetypes. I mean, like we could do a whole show on that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, I know. And thank you for taking the call. And the last thing I was going to leave you with is just a question. You don't even have to answer it, but do you think someone could consider themselves atheist if they live by and believe in the 7 Hermetic principles? And you don't have to answer that, but just maybe sometime. Yeah.
I will have to get back to you on it as soon as I figure out what the 7 Hermetic principles are. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
Those are.
Thanks again, Chris. Appreciate you calling in. Man, yeah. I don't even know one of the Hermetic principles. Do you know any Hermetic principles?
I do not. I mean, maybe I know them, but I just don't know them as that title.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know.
If it's like, you know, brush your teeth every day or, you know, like that kind of stuff, I can get down for that. If it's like, you know, you can turn lead into gold if you think about it hard enough, I don't know. That's what I think of when it's that kind of stuff. But, yeah, but really when it comes down to it, all atheism is, well, okay, side note. How I define atheism, right? Because everybody always debates about this.
Right.
Is a lack of belief in God. So I'm sure you could believe in some Hermetic principles as long as you don't believe in God, you know, and still call yourself an atheist or lack of belief, right? So yeah, for sure.
That's what I was going to do. As long as there's no truth claims that you're like, this is true, you know, other than, hey, this is like a good principle to live by. Yeah, I mean, you can live by principles and not think the magical claims are true. Yeah. Absolutely.
For sure. Let's go ahead and go to our next call then. I want to go to Andrew in New Jersey. Hey, Andrew, what's going on?
Well, hi. Yes, I'm Andrew in New Jersey.
Yes, it's Andrew in New Jersey. Andrew in New Jersey. Welcome to Truth Wanted.
Andrew in New Jersey.
Andrew in New Jersey, here on the show with Brent Lee and Objectively Dan. What's going on, man? How can we help you today?
It took me a really long time. I wrote something down so I can calm down because I can already feel my heart beating like a maniac.
It's okay. Take your time, dude.
What's going on?
No, I'm just really excited because I don't get to have conversations this is my first time actually reaching out to a community.
Hell yeah. Welcome to the show, brother.
Awesome, man.
You've been
Thank
missing
you.
out.
Yeah.
Come on in.
I have. Well, what's funny is I've been listening to people that have our similar thinking for such a long time, but for some reason not claiming myself to be an atheist. It made no sense.
Well,
if you didn't know, I'm an atheist.
Okay. Side note, I want to let you talk about your thing, but side note, I did the exact same thing. I was very reluctant to call myself an atheist, and that's got to be because of the cultural baggage behind that word, for sure. And kind of putting together I might as well say it so I can kind of convince other people that this is kind of a thing you should be interested in, right? I think Brent would agree with me.
Oh yeah. I was terrified of that word for a long time, but once I said it, I just kept saying it, and then now I can't stop saying it, and I want to tell everybody.
He wants to spread the good news, right, Brent?
Right. What's that?
You want to spread the good news, That's what it is.
Right, yeah. I'm trying to spread the gospel of the fact that the gospel is not true.
Yeah. But Andrew, what did you want to talk with us today about, man?
Okay, so if anything that I say does make sense, let me know. But I wrote this down so I couldn't get sidetracked.
Mm-hmm. Go for it.
I was raised in a Roman Catholic family. Sure. I was raised in a Roman Catholic family, and I was never a true believer. I always had questions, but was never allowed to ask them, and realized the harm my indoctrination attack from those around me caused a failure in my ability to act as the best person I thought I could be. I was a confused and angry teenager who was told to accept something he saw no reason to accept as true, and was not properly to go out and look for the truth. For me, I felt now that I have a better understanding of what morality is outside of it's just good or bad, I realized that I was always floating between subjective and objective morality, constantly flowing between, if there are objectives, then what defines the objectives, to no, it's obviously subjective. Whereas everyone around me was floating between, I should add the relative and absolute. They were going between absolute objectivity while wanting to accept the methods. In my view, they were trying to accept the methods of a relative subjective perspective, which is where I always was. But in terms of that moral, if they were to say a moral core, I can't, coming back to this, I can't help but sometimes still see things that are not sin, or that I couldn't possibly consider sin in terms of a subjective view. I still consider it as sin, and at those moments I feel wholly terrible about myself.
Can you give me an example?
Having a consensual sexual interaction in high school.
Hey, can I tell you something, Andrew? I knew you were exactly going to talk about sex. You know why? Because that's either masturbation or sex. There's only two options there where we could have gone down, okay?
It's almost nothing. I know, it's almost nothing else. There's nothing else that makes me feel bad.
Absolutely, dude. And I'm sure you have some more to say, but first thoughts about this. I'm proud of you for coming to the place where you are now and deciding that, hey, I really want to look into this and decide who I am for myself and not what other people told me, because that's a brave thing to do. So props to you, Andrew, for doing that and for calling into this show. Thank you.
Kudos,
for doing
sir.
that. Second thing is, hey, I did the same thing, and it still lasted for years, where I thought of what people were doing was degenerate. That was kind of the word. When I was first hanging out with the Atheist Community of Austin, let me tell you, there's some interesting folks that come around here, okay? From different folks. There's some people that you wouldn't see at your typical church meetup, okay? They're not coming down to the Wednesday night youth group, okay? Well, mostly because they're adults, but you get the idea what I'm saying, right? It's not the typical culture, and that's what it is, man. It's a cultural difference that you're finding here, because you're giving up this identity that you had. and your cultural understandings of what's right and wrong, and you're kind of progressing into this new space that you may or may not have had the chance to share with people. I noticed you said, like, this is the first time you talk with people in community. And I'll tell you this much, if you get plugged into more community like this, maybe it's a Unitarian church, maybe it's an Oasis hang up, like, you get more used to this. It becomes easier. I say the word shit and fuck every week on this show. I would not have said that 5 years ago. Okay, I was a clean Christian boy whose tongue was clean and didn't need that stuff. But, like, you know, it doesn't bother me as much now. One, because I'm used to it, but two, because I've deconstructed a lot of that baggage that comes with it. And sex, dude, that's a big thing to deconstruct, because they get you with that real young, with how you're supposed to treat other people, how you're supposed to treat your own sexual purity, and just those concepts are really hard to break down, because it's in the fiber of your being. You know, like, it's religion. There's very few religions in this world that don't have something to say about sex, whether positive or negative, right? Like, everybody's got an opinion about it, but it is something to deconstruct. Brent, I want you to chime in here. What's up, man?
Yeah, I haven't checked with the Scientologists yet, but I'm sure they have something to say about sex.
Yeah.
But, you know, I just don't know. But no, I do want to speak to one thing that you were saying earlier about whether or not it's objective or subjective. Mm-hmm. And I do think, and you know, I love Matt's basically breakdown of morality, where he's saying it's a non-subjective evaluation of consequences of actions with respect to a specific goal, being the best well-being for the most people, right? No, that is an excellent metric in order to use for morality, right? But I do still feel like it's not non-subjective. Like, it is, or, you know what I mean? I feel like it is subjective, because we still do disagree on the way to obtain that goal, right? It's not as simple as a chess game, you know. And it's like that's usually the example that's used, is we can determine what the best move is if we understand what the goal is, right? And I think that it's still subjective, because when it comes to morality and these complicated situations, like, it's our subjective interpretation of the best way to get to the best well-being for the most amount of people, and so, you know, I don't know, I totally, and that's the metric that I use, and that's why I'm so liberal, and that's why I'm so progressive. It's because that's the metric that I use, is the best well-being for the most people.
Yeah.
You know, and
which is
it's a
yeah, if you want to use the technical terms, it's almost a combination of utilitarian and consequentialist ethics in a way. At least that's how I define my own ethics as a secular humanist. But, you know, we've had conversations in the past. I'm almost a moral nihilist in the sense that I still think it is ultimately subjective in how we view things. A lot of people try to view morality and view ethics outside of the wants and desires of humans, but it's like, but that's what... I mean, our desires to be good is why we even want to study ethics in the first place. Like, we want to have the right action. We want what's best for people. And, like, the fact to me that people come up with these ethical systems, that's like, look, it doesn't matter what people want. It doesn't matter what people think. This is the right way. But it's like, but the whole point of morality and ethics is that we're doing it for us. Like, people want to be good Christians because they think that's the best thing. Like, that is the system's already set up. You just want to follow it. Like, people aren't being Christians because, you know, they're begrudgingly accepting it for some reason. Like, usually there's a zeal there who wants to. Now, you know, if you're deconstructing it a little bit, obviously you're going to have some, you know, issues with it, right? But, like, the most zealous Christians I know are the ones who want to follow the law of God or figure out what that is as best they can, so they can be the best people. So,
right, because because if you implement beliefs into this whole narrative, right, into this whole concept of getting to the best well-being for the most people, right now, they're thinking that the way to get to the best well-being for the most people is to make them become Christians, because that's ultimately going to be the best for their well-being, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because then they're not going to burn in hell.
Exactly.
So that whole aspect throws a fucking wrench.
Sure does.
Into the whole goddamn system.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it fucks the whole thing up. And I can swear. I've been swearing. I can swear, right?
Oh yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah.
Depending.
The truth is explicit on this show. The truth wanted is explicit. I will say that. I can't control what comes out of the mouths of the callers that come with this thing. So yeah, we're totally cool with swearing on this program. But Andrew, we've been talking a lot here. What do you think about any of the stuff we're saying? Is it resonating with you?
No, that's the thing. It always was and always has. Anytime it was argued to me that I need to have some sort of objective in mind, I became confused, especially when it always seemed to lead down a rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. Like, I ask, how do we know I'm supposed to act this way? Well, because God or the Bible says it. Well, then how do I know that the Bible, like, I took a natural skeptic look at it from whenever I could start thinking and was told about God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. Like, asked my dad as a kid, why does God have to be three, or why does it have to be like that? Is it not possible for God to be thousands of little Greek type gods that are controlling just every little dumb, like significantly smaller and smaller piece of the world? And instead of getting an answer of any kind, I got told never to ask questions like that again.
And you know what's interesting about that whole experience, Andrew? God never told you, did he? You know?
How could he?
How could he? That's the thing, right? It's like we tried to, like all three of us tried for a long time to figure this stuff out. And you know what? Like, we never got it from the big man himself. I mean, like, I joke about this, but like, I have a call-in show. I think if God's out there, he should give us a ring. You know, like it's 7 p.m. Central Fridays. Come on, man. Like, that's the thing. Like, it all comes down to convincing ourselves of what we think is right and what we think is best. And that manifests sometimes. For Catholics, it manifests in community a lot, I think. You know, like keeping up with the Catholic traditions. Like, that's what's best. You know, following Mass and doing what you got to do. And for other Christians, it's, you know, for the Baptist folks, it's following following the fruits of the Spirit and being reborn through baptism and stuff. I mean, like, it develops into cultural mores depending on where you go. But again, it is at the end of the day just culture. It is just human beings in groups together figuring this stuff out. There doesn't seem to be any evidence that this stuff is coming on high. You know, so I don't know.
And I do have some I want to add, like with that, like it's sort of adjacent to it, I guess. It's just a story that I have, like, where I actually for a long time I had an issue with pain medication. I got in a car accident and went to a hack doctor that overprescribed me a lot of medicine, and I ended up getting stuck on opiates. And I for a time I went to a methadone clinic, and I remember thinking, oh man, this place has got to be, you know, because I was a Christian at the time. I still was a Christian after I left basically the church. But I remember going there, and I remember thinking, oh man, there's demons all over this place. Like this, you know, this is a demon haven, you know. And I remember looking up, and I saw demons. They were all flying around the methadone clinic. And I was like, wow, what the hell? Like, oh my God, it's like, it's just right there. You know what I mean? It's just right on the surface. Like, I can see it. This is real. This is real. You know, and then later I became, you know, just in the past 3 years, I became an atheist, and went through the same process again and went back to the exact same methadone clinic, except that the time that I went to the methadone clinic was different. Like, I used to go like before it got light out, because you have to go in the morning because they don't want you to do it after you go to work, because that's when you'd want to use anyway, and they want to try to temper that type of behavior. So I was going before, and it was like, but this time I was going a little bit later, and it was light outside. And in Florida, bats aren't really a thing. Like, we don't really see them that often, but they are there, you know. And I didn't realize it, but the whole time I was just seeing bats.
No kidding.
I thought they were, you know.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Wow.
And it and I totally was confused, but it was just bats, and I went and I saw, I went it was just during the peak hours in the morning, where the sun's starting to come out, and finally I could see them, because I couldn't really see them in the dark, but I could see that something was fluttering around,
Sure.
And it was scary looking, and so it was very convincing.
Wow.
But when it was light out, no, they're just bats.
Wow. Isn't that amazing, though? Like that your own cultural understanding of the world like interacted with your interpretations in that moment of what you were seeing and convinced you of something else. Like, how often does that happen to people? How many times do people think they're seeing aliens because they've seen this stuff on TV? You know what I mean? Like it's wild how like just a simple mistake like that could affect your entire worldview, could make you totally believe that you saw demons one time.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, Andrew, now that you're here on the other side, I just want to say, like, I'm glad that you're calling into the show and you're getting plugged in and stuff. I just want to say one more thing about, you mentioned your anxieties about sin and like coming into this new thing. I promise you it gets better over time. Like it may not be the best for you. And there's people who this affects them the long term. And I don't know your whole story. I don't know how you grew up, but I will say, at least I can speak for myself, and Brent could probably speak for himself. It does get better. You have to find the right people, though, that you can get connected with so that you can normalize yourself and feel like you're okay. Let me tell you, there's people out there, sexual partners, who are willing to just walk that stuff with you and take your time with that stuff. It's 2019, baby. There's somebody out there for everybody. That's not a belief I actually have. What I really think is there's people. I don't believe in the one. I do believe there's people that are compatible for you, and there's people that you can have those experiences with who are willing to do that. So don't get hung up on that. You're okay. You're normal. You're probably to a Christian you are a sinner, but sin doesn't really mean anything anymore. So just don't even worry about it, right?
But that's kind of what was missing. I should have been told that everyone's going to have sex and how to deal with that situation.
Yeah.
But I wasn't educated.
Yeah.
How is that fair to me? Because now I feel bad about a thing that I probably could have avoided if just given the proper tools.
I don't know, man. I don't know. But listen, hopefully you know what condoms are and stuff now. I know that you're Catholic, so
I was never that bad.
Okay. Okay.
No, my mother was a Jesuit, so I got some freedom.
Okay, there you go. Well, that's good. Well, anyway, Andrew, I wish you best of luck. Anything else you want to say before we peace out here?
And thank you. So far, I'm having a blast and actually talking to people instead of just thinking in my own brain over and over.
Hey man, look me up on Facebook. Okay, I'm Brent Lee on Facebook, man. We'll hang out. Okay?
Also, check out the Secular Therapy Project. They probably be one to help you out. And hey, Atheist Community of Austin, we got a Discord, which I need to be more on. By the way, some people have requested that I come on after the show and stuff. I won't be able to do it tonight, but in the future, I'm gonna make that a thing where I hang out with you guys on kind of the after show. So definitely check those out.
You absolutely should.
Yeah,
we have fun there.
But please contact me or unapologetics spelled with an X 666@gmail.com. Please hit me up, man. I will, I'll connect you with the community, dude. That's my whole gig.
For sure.
I like connecting people.
Yes,
awesome. I would love it. That was unapologetics with an X, right?
Yes, unapologetics with an X 666@gmail.com. Just hit me up, man.
I didn't know there was a 666 in there. That's so funny. Oh man. Anyway, Andrew, thanks again for calling, and I hope to hear from you again soon. Man. So yeah, great. Those kinds of calls. That's I love that stuff, man, because
that makes my heart feel good.
That's what it's all about right here, dude. This is, it's the community, man. It's the sharing and experiences. It's this figuring out of, whoa, you thought that shit too? I'm not the only one. Right. This is, and the most of the United States, at least, especially if you're from Texas, like I am. You don't get to do that with people as much. The intersection isn't there. Thank goodness for the internet. I said this before and I'll say it again. Shout out to you guys who were doing this stuff before the internet and before, communications technology was as great as it was now, because y'all are hardcore. Because some days it's real hard, It really is to kind of, feel the way that we do about this kind of stuff. But
hell yeah.
Yeah. But
so true.
That about wraps it up for the calls tonight. Brent, where can people find you at if they want to get in touch with you?
All right. So, unapologetics666@gmail.com. You can email me there.
Yeah.
Or, we have a Facebook page that you can find us at. It's Unapologetics, the Atheist Response to Apologetics. We're a podcast that's on all the podcast things. We're on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spreaker, whatever. Whatever you're on, I'm sure you'll be able to find us. I do a sideshow called, on my Facebook page. So go to my Facebook page. I have some debates and stuff like that you can find from there. And that's pretty much it.
Sweet. Well, yeah, I want to say thanks again to everyone who supports this show on Patreon. It's patreon.com/truthwanted. The money that goes to that show goes straight to the show. I don't get any of that. It all goes to here in the Atheist Community of Austin to help make programs like this better. If you like this show, yeah, for sure. If you really like it, please choose to support on there. Or, you can find us on iTunes, Spreaker, Spotify, and YouTube. Definitely subscribe on there. Leave us some reviews. Help us get the word out there that this show exists. And please feel free to call in every week. But if you're too scared to call in or you have some other inquiries into the show, you can email me at truth@atheist-community.org. You can also find me on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan. And there is a Truth Wanted Facebook page, which I need to be more active at. Because I have not been. And so, yeah, that's the thing that needs to happen. Also, again, check us out on Discord. There is an Atheist Community of Austin Discord. Links in the description for that. Not tonight. I'm not going to be in there tonight, but in the future, I want to be able to hang out a bit more after the show, talk about the calls and stuff, and talk with you guys because, you guys are what makes this show happen every single week. Those of you who listen. And I really do appreciate it, guys. I look forward to this every single week. I look forward to all the new guests that get to come in. And if you're interested in making an appearance on the show, definitely we're officially open for new people to kind of come in. Before, it was kind of me vetting and personal connections and figuring out. But, there's always more people out there. It doesn't matter if you're even a content creator specifically. Like, if you have a cool story or you have something you want to share, please come reach out and come talk with me and we can figure something out. But Brent, is there anything else that
I got to?
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, real quick. I have to say, this is so cool because it was like the one thing that I was going to email Matt Dillahunty about because he's the president of the ACA at the moment. And the one thing that I was wanting to reach out to him about was that there is so much good content out there. There's so many good small podcasts that are just awesome to listen to. Trust me, I've reached a bunch of them, and then we're all like a little family, and it's amazing. And they just don't have as big a platform as they should, because it's just hard to make it up in this way. And I wanted to email Matt and be like, hey man, is there a show that maybe you could platform some people? What's up? And all the while here was Truth Wanted.
That's right.
The show for that purpose.
That's right.
Specifically. So,
and here's the thing.
Thank you, Dan.
Oh, no problem.
Awesome.
Look, AXP, Talk Heathen, they've been upping their guest game. It's because of this show right here, okay? And I didn't get it. They were doing guests and stuff before, but this consistent new guests every week, it does not get better than that. I hear the production folks groaning in the back. They're disagreeing. I don't care. All right, this show is where it's at. The best, number one. Yeah. We are number one. Sorry, I can't. There they are, the folks in the back that help make this show happen every week. Thank you, production crew. Thanks,
you guys. So awesome.
I got a gun for this show, man. It's my little thing here. But anyway, yeah, I love all the shows that are helped made here at the Atheist Community of Austin. Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen, Secular Sexuality. Definitely go check all that stuff out if you haven't already.
I've never heard of that first one. I was all the rest.
Never heard of that first. Yeah, me neither. Right. So. Anyway, folks, we are kind of at the closing time here. I want to thank Brent again for being on with me this week. Brent, it was a pleasure. And definitely go check out his podcast and his projects if you haven't already. One more thing, guys. I have shirts. I don't know if you saw a couple episodes ago, get to wear them. If you're interested in getting a shirt, definitely send me an email. I hear I'm getting some hats soon as well. So
I'm
that'll be
going
cool.
to go.
There's Mark right now. He's wearing that shirt. He's rocking it. That's Mark, our producer there. He's real cool. Those of you who are listening on the podcast feed, we do have video for this. It is kind of cool. But, we really do need to wrap things up here. Brent, thanks again for being on the show. And thank you guys for listening.
you.
You remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.